Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another episode of the Urban Entrepreneur Show. I'm your host, Anna Banks, and today we're diving into a vital topic for every trailblazer out there. And I don't know about you, but I think that most entrepreneurs are trailblazers in their own right. So, we are going to be talking about leading on empty. Now, that's pretty relatable. It's going to be the entrepreneur's guide for managing stress and avoiding burnout. So, our guest today is Barbara Gustavson, and she is a seasoned leadership consultant and a mental and brain health advocate. Um, and her company is Discover Next Step. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about this young lady. She is going to be bringing a wealth of knowledge on building resilience and maintaining wellness amidst all of the whirlwind activities that come with entrepreneurship. So, whether you're running a startup or leading a team, this episode is going to equip you with some strategies to manage stress effectively. So make sure that you get out something to write with, to take some notes, because she's going to also help us in doing the and managing the stress to sustain peak performance without burning out. So, with that, welcome to the Urban Entrepreneur Show, Barbara.
Thank you, Anna. And wow, you gave me quite an introduction. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and especially excited about this topic. Not because I'm some super expert at it, but in the expert in the way that I've been through burnout several times. And it's one of those things that I've delved into, I've embraced, and I really enjoy taking people through the process of understanding burnout, if they're even experiencing burnout, because that's a buzzword these days. What does that
Mhm.
really look like and mean? How does it impact us as an individual, but also show up in our business too? So I'm really excited for this conversation.
Well, I tell you, they say, the truth be told, you know, I think that a lot of entrepreneurs go through burnout at various stages of their business, as well as just at various stages of life.
Mhm.
And so, but before I go into like all of the questions that I want to ask you, um, that's going to help our listening and viewing audience. Tell me a little bit about how is it that you decided to work on or investigate and brain health.
Wow. Well, I will tell you, this would have been farthest from my mind. If you asked me 5, 10 years ago if this would be part of coaching, I would say and I would run the other way. But as I look throughout my life, and one day I sat down and did an exercise and even asked myself, why is this brain health so important to me? And I wrote down 17 reasons why.
Mm,
And each of those reasons was a person's name in my life. Family members who had been impacted by brain health disorder, friends who had impacted. I had a dear mentor impacted by a tumor, one by a brain infection, and it impacted their leadership. And so it just kept staring me in the face. And for myself, I was struggling in different areas. And I started to get curious, is it, positivity in our mindset is is important, but is it really everything if our brain isn't functioning at its best? And so I really started getting curious and asking questions, and I started delving and doing my, quasi research, my home research. But then I met a doctor that really changed my thinking, and he wrote a book called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life by Dr. Daniel Amen. And in that book, I started looking at myself in a completely different way. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I understood why I was having prolonged anxiety. I understood why some past trauma was interfering with my work now. And it led me to getting my brain scanned through something called SPEC imaging. And it revealed 3 mild injuries I never knew I had. And it accounted for even some of the learning disabilities I was struggling with, and why I was going complete blank in the middle of presentations. It was really crazy, but it really seemed to fit a big missing piece of my puzzle. And I realized as I'm, working with other people, they had missing pieces to their puzzle too. So I really started to see brain health, it's the structure, it's the thing that drives the mind, and they work hand in hand. So I really became committed to reframing mental health, starting a new kind of conversation, and really opening up and realizing that when we, Socrates says, know thyself. And it's really about self-awareness about our brain too, how we work, how we operate. And the cool thing is there's patterns. And I don't know about you, Anna, but I love assessments, and I love seeing patterns in how we're wired, how we communicate and lead, but there's patterns in our literal brain too. So that's kind of the short version, how I started, in that area. And then I had a wonderful chance to meet Dr. Amen, and it led to the work that we're now doing together, just educating people through wellness, but using the lens of brain health and getting easy brain-based strategies into people's hands, because a lot of people are struggling. Not everyone's struggling, but a lot of people are. But it's giving them tools to use that are brain calming in high times of anxiety, or brain boosting, when we feel a lack of motivation.
Well, all of that sounds absolutely fabulous. And I'm glad that you said about, the being in the middle of a presentation and just like forgetting what I'm about to say. Look, I thought that was just a symptom of age, but
oh, I could tell you stories. Oh my goodness.
But but it's good at this particular time in history that we have, people such as yourself who are really helping us, to look at other ways of being able to deal with the things that we're dealing with today. And I would say that especially after this pandemic that we all just found ourselves on the other side of, the whole mental health issues and whatnot are extremely important, and especially for entrepreneurs. So can you just share with us a typical scenario where an entrepreneur might not realize that brain health is affecting their decision-making leadership abilities?
What comes to mind, pushing long hours, not taking breaks. Let me help this person first. Let me, let them pick my brain. I always need to take action. I need to always say yes to opportunities. But struggling with brain fog, low energy, feeling disconnected, just not feeling yourself, and sometimes even feeling a lack of excitement about something you were really excited and felt called to do. There's so many different ways that brain health can be affecting decision making. I remember when I was a student of Dr. Amen, and also just going through his course, and as we were talking, the story sticks in my mind. I share it a lot, but it just was one of those moments that I really started to understand how the brain's involved in our business and our relationships, even in our spiritual life. And it's a story about a railroad worker named Phineas Gage. And there's actually a whole lot of studies. And it's one of the cases where they realize the connection between brain and behavior. And
Wow.
Phineas, he was a leader, and this was a railroad company in Vermont. And he, excuse me.
Mhm. It's time for a water sip.
Whew, Anna, where did that come from? Okay. Where were we? Okay. I have a
Phineas.
tickle in my throat. Yeah, I may have to pause every now and then. Okay.
That's okay.
So we were
Look,
at
look,
Phineas, right?
we're alive and we are people.
Okay. Hopefully I didn't hack anybody's ear too loudly.
It's okay.
So
They'll
we
forgive
were
you.
at Phineas. Okay. So just imagine Phineas, he has a steel rod in his hand with a pointing end, and he's tamping down gunpowder on this rock, and it exploded. Well, this
Mhm.
rod shot up and went through Phineas's temporal lobe, this part, and his cheekbone, and he survived. And amazingly, with the help of a few people, they walked him into the town doctor, which I think would have been quite a scene, but they were able to pull it out. He went home and he recovered and went back to work 3 months later. And this was a man who was dependable. People counted on him. He
Mhm.
was kind. He had good moral character. Well, when he returned to work, he was no longer Phineas Gage. He swore. He caused fights. He was the worst worker, and he got fired, and he went from job to job to job. And finally, Barnum Circus hired him, where he worked there for 10 years before he passed away. But that shows that, there there is a connection between trauma, brain, and behavior. And through imaging now, and this is imaging using spec imaging where it shows activity and blood flow, they now know that you don't have to suffer a major brain injury
Mm.
for your brain to struggle. There are images of someone with prolonged Lyme disease untreated. Sometimes, if left untreated, it can lead to symptoms of schizophrenia.
Oh my.
And with ADD, they've been able to subtype 7 different kinds. They're all in different different parts of the brain, but there's patterns. And so sometimes, even like through a past concussion, where you fall down, you might feel fine, but years later, you might develop symptoms because there could have been a disruption to blood flow or activity. So it really shows you that a lot can happen to the brain, and it's the texture of like tofu or
Mhm.
butter and jello. And think of the underside of your skull. There's these tiny pointy ridges, and your brain wasn't meant to take an impact. And there's sports today. I'm sure there's sports fans saying, "Oh, I don't want to listen to this," but our brain just wasn't meant to take certain impacts. And so
Mhm.
for me, when I saw some areas that had been compromised and more vulnerable, I had a horseback riding accident when I was 19, and I broke my back close to my
Mm.
spinal cord, but I fully recovered. I had hit my head, but because I wasn't knocked unconscious, no one ever scanned me. But when I returned to school that freshman year, I had ringing in my ears. I was
Mm.
depressed, high anxiety. I was brain fogged. I couldn't focus even on, words on a page. So it really shows you that a lot can happen. And how would we know unless we look? So it just shows that we're very resilient, but there's a lot of things that can hurt the brain. Fortunately, there's a lot of good things that can help it too.
Well, I look, I have a little scar right here over my right eye that
Mm.
I got. So this, all of these kind of things are having me think like, oh my goodness, maybe I should go get my brain scanned. You know, you
Well,
know what
the
I'm saying? Because, and the reason why I'm really saying that is because we're finding, or I'm seeing, I should say, so many instances of trauma related types of things.
Mm.
We hear of, people like in the military. We just celebrated Memorial Day, which, on it, for those that didn't make it, but for those that did, like the trauma of war, the trauma of just sometimes growing up can really now have an effect on our brain, not even in taking into account the fact that we all fall down when we're kids, we all hit our heads, we all do all of that kind of stuff. But what might be the results of that years and years later? And more importantly, what could we do once we found out that something has gone amiss?
Yes, lots of things come to my mind. Aside from physical trauma, think about emotional trauma, especially with children. And you may be familiar with ACEs. That's uh, adverse childhood experiences. And there's an easy assessment that you can just Google online. But there's 10 areas that show up that someone can be impacted by different traumas. And the higher your score, the more susceptible you are. But there's a lot of research showing the higher your ACE scores, the more likelihood it's going to impact you later in life, your relationships. They've been able to even connect it to how many sick days you'll take off. So there's a lot of research showing about the impacts of trauma. What they don't talk a lot about is something called post-traumatic growth, which I feel like
Mm,
is good news. It's like we know about the trauma, and there's the big T trauma, like the
yeah.
huge events. There's a little T trauma that still impact us, but it may not be tied to an external event. And there's other things in between. There's vicarious trauma, there's secondary trauma. But the good news is post-traumatic growth, and it's tied to resilience. And that's the hope that we need. And that is even because, not despite it, but because of what we've been through.
Hmm.
If we're intentional, we will come out stronger.
Wow.
And there's so much research pointing, in fact, in a comparative studies between people who have not had trauma, who had life easy, but later experienced its challenges later, they were not as resilient as those who had severe trauma, but had focused on becoming more resilient. It's mind blowing. And it really shows that our brain, our whole body, we have the ability to adapt, no matter what we've been through. And again, I think that comes back to we need hope because there's so much talk about trauma
Yes.
triggers. It's important. I really believe, even as a coach, to be trauma informed. I've been through different courses for that because we never know who we might be in contact with. And it's important for us to know the signs. Every person is different on how they experience and express that trauma.
Well, that's like a perfect lead in to my next question, Barbara. And that is, well, first of all, you stated that you've been working with Dr. Amen. Now, are you a physician or are you not?
I am not, and I tell people I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV, but I am a certified brain health coach, and I'm excited. I'm in a master's program with positive psychology because I really want to focus a strength-based approach
Yes.
to the workplace. Like there's a lot of people struggling. Not everyone is, again, but I really want to focus on the potential of it. But having that knowledge really helps fill in some of the missing gaps with people. They may be doing all the right things, saying all the right things, thinking all the right things, and still struggling. And so often there could be some underlying issues they aren't aware of. So my role in that area, not as a physician, I'm kind of the
Mhm, mhm.
in-between person, like a health coach, but my role is to really guide them to, understanding what could be happening, but pointing them to the qualified professional, specialist to get certain assessments and to get resources in their hands.
Well, that's great. So again, what are some of the initial signs um, associated with burnout that
Uh,
entrepreneurs should be aware of? And second part, what are some of the steps that they should take in order to address it? Because first of all, burnout is like no fun,
no
like
fun.
zero,
No
zero
fun.
fun.
No fun.
And we may struggle, we'll struggle to get through it, but it would help if we could, I don't like to use this word self-diagnose, but be self-aware
Mhm.
so that we could um, find ways to address it. Because if we can identify it, we know then we can address it.
Yes, and I'm glad you framed it that way because we can do more than we think we can. And one of the ways is really educating ourselves,
Mm-hmm,
getting to know. I like to look at kind of juxtaposing, looking at both sides. So we know how we're feeling, what our habits are, how we're behaving when things are going really well, don't we?
mm-hmm,
And and so we're in that green, I call it the green zone. We're on fire. We have all the energy. We can conquer the world. And then we know when we start feeling a little bit off, I call that the yellow zone. We're a little bit more tired, but we can still function. We can still put a smile on our face. We look like we're fine, but we're just feeling a little bit off. And then there's the red zone. That's when, red light, red, that's when we're like, okay, something's up. I've got to stop, and so really getting to know your zones is really important because when we start, getting off track, that's when we can really tune in and really listen to ourselves, and really honor what we're feeling. And so for me, um, I just in January got out of a 15-year caregiving journey. And so the impact of caregiving, and it wasn't all physical caregiving day in, day out. I'm talking about the emotional caregiving
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
for a parent that can lead to true exhaustion,
mm-hmm,
true burnout. And burnout typically, when you think of a lot of the studies with healthcare workers, they're talking about true burnout. And it is definitely physical exhaustion brought on from long hours of work, like
yes.
crazy hours. And, you know, dealing with the trauma of patients, but that can trickle into other areas. It can trickle into our emotional well-being, our spiritual well-being, in our mental well-being, and it can affect all areas, but that is really the true burnout. And so the question I would have if anyone's wondering, or thinking they're burnout, think about, is it true burnout? Is it classic burnout? Or could you be experiencing what a lot of people are, especially in the helping professionals, and that's compassion fatigue?
Mm,
So, what you're looking at now is you may be feeling signs of burnout, but you're also day in and day out listening to people's problems. You are being severely impacted by it. And there are studies that show there is a cost of caring too much, and there's a cost of listening too much. It's
mm-mm.
crazy. I did a research project on this. And it's called secondary traumatic stress when you're listening day in and day out to things that are so upsetting and traumatizing to others. But for us, as the caring people that we are and the nurturers, it's really hard to keep listening to that without being impacted. And one of a classic sign of burnout and compassion fatigue is becoming cynical. I didn't know that. And I found
Oh, I
myself,
can understand that. I
can you?
really can. Only
I
because it's like it gets to be too much. It gets to
Mhm.
be too much. And that becomes, almost like a self-defense mechanism. Like I can't do that. Like passing people homeless on the street day in and day out. I can't
Yes.
deal with that. So it's after a while, it's like, you try not to even see them.
Yes, and what they found is certain personalities are more, receptive to
Mm,
that. So think about, those are, there's a wonderful book called Burnout. It's written by 2 sisters, and they call it the human giver syndrome. For whatever reason, that's my one takeaway. It's like, I have the human giver syndrome. But what they found is that with burnout, but also um, stress, and I don't believe all stress is bad. I'll get to that in a
mhm,
minute if we have time. Um, what we have is dysregulated nervous systems.
hmm,
Our nervous system is like we're supposed to have a healthy ebb and flow. When there's danger, we're supposed to have high stress, but then we're supposed to come down. But what we're not doing when we have prolonged stress, when we're never able to come down, it means we haven't ended the stress cycle
wow.
for that situation. And when it accumulates, stress cycle on top of stress, I mean, just realize it's easy to get stuck in that high alert. And so what happens is people can get stuck in the high alert, um, or they can disconnect. They call it hyper arousal, hypo arousal. So disconnect is another description that I've experienced, but I've seen others too. And so they feel disconnected from their work.
Mhm,
It's like, why am I not motivated? Or they might be disconnected from themselves or from their friends, even.
mm, mm. Wow. That is, as
Who
you
knew?
were talking, that made me think of like so many scenarios, that have happened. Like I had one contract, and as a trainer, professional trainer by as a trainer by profession, I've been, doing corporate training for a long time. One of the companies that I worked with, I was feel like I was always on high alert.
Mm,
Blood pressure went up, everything, sleep, just it was just a mess.
mm,
But
mm.
one of the things though that I just have to ask about, because when you're in that high alert, or even in the low alert, the hyper or hypo, it can affect your sleep, and sleep is uber important.
Oh my goodness, yes. Uber.
Uber.
Double Uber important. Yes,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
talk to us about that, because um as an entrepreneur, I know that there are times, when we're pushing, we're trying to get deadlines met and all this other stuff, and you still have life, the kids, the dog, the cat, all
Mhm.
of those things going on. Um, you may not, or we may not always allow ourselves time to sleep.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm gonna flip it over and kinda look at it, a different way.
Okay.
Often, what we think may be affecting our sleep at night has to do with everything we're doing during the day.
Hmm.
And so it's good to look at what we're doing at night, what's happening, but also what's happening during the day, and I'm gonna bring it back to that stress cycle. If we can end the stress cycle, it's gonna help us sleep at night. So, for instance, let's say, and I can think of, especially one day last week, it was a very stressful day, and I am usually really good at taking breaks, and I'll talk hopefully
Hmm.
about that in a minute because it's so important. But this particular day, it was bumper to bumper Zoom traffic, and I thought I can do it. I pushed through, like, I know better. I knew better. Um, and I could just really feel the stress building. And what with it's been described to me, and I was taking this course, and think of an animal when it's completely stressed and in danger, and then the danger's over and it's okay. Well, it doesn't go back to doing what it's doing. What it does is it goes and hides and shakes, like it literally shakes, like a bunny, like a
Mhm,
rabbit will
mhm.
shake. And when it's done shaking, then it'll move on. We tend to, like, it's something stressful, we'll just go to the next thing or we'll keep doing. We don't give ourselves time to restore from that stressor. So one of the things that we can do for ourselves, is throughout the day, give ourselves time to de-stress. It could be a break. I recommend at least every 90 minutes because we have something called the ultradian rhythm. It's similar to the circadian rhythm that we hear about, but what this is every 90 minutes your brain needs to recycle and flush out the toxins.
Oh my.
And what it'll do is it'll send a signal to your body that you're supposed to take a break. Like you'll immediately get tired. And usually afternoon slumps is when we feel it, but we push harder. We usually ignore that. But what they recommend every 90 minutes, take a 10 to 20-minute break, do some, take a walk, do something completely different, um, listen to music or take a nap or something, and then go back to what you were doing. And what they found is people tend to be a lot more productive if they honor that. So that is something that we can do to really help our sleep. Also, first thing in the morning, go outside, be in the light 10 to 20 minutes, and that'll help reset your circadian rhythm. And the next thing I do that I really have come to love is blue light glasses.
Hmm.
So, blue light, which is present both in natural sunlight and artificial light from screens, it can disrupt the production of melatonin. And this is a hormone that regulates your sleep cycle. This is
And
a
that's the stuff
big
that we
thing.
take sometimes, right?
Yes, exactly. And with the amount of time we're on our computers, so think about this disruption can make it harder to fall asleep and
Mhm.
get quality sleep. It can also lead to grogginess the next day. And if you have ADD, I'm one of them, it can really wreak havoc on your business. So blue light glasses, you can get them really cheap on Amazon. It can help your brain produce more melatonin by limiting the blue light exposure that can help you drift off. So, what you can do is in the evening, if you're on your TV or computer, about 8 o'clock, I usually pop on these funky blue light glasses. My husband laughs at me all the time, but I'll watch TV through that and I can see it perfectly fine. But what it does, it starts signaling to my brain it's nighttime and it'll help that healthy melatonin. So that's something that we can definitely do. And the last thing um, I will mention is the blood sugar roller coaster. And I've heard this called hangxiety. I love that term, but think about how you keep your blood sugar stable during the day can definitely impact you at night.
Mm. Okay, so it's not just about it's time to go to bed, um, and then laying there and hoping that you fall asleep.
Yes, I will say the brain loves routines. Think of it as a toddler. You get it out of routine, it's not going to be happy. So, if you're used to going to bed like really late at night, I would encourage go to bed 15 minutes earlier for a week and let your brain acclimate to that. Then increase it to 30 minutes. So, those are really small steps,
Mhm.
especially for busy people. And it'll, your brain will start to acclimate and getting used to that, and your biological clock will fall in line.
Well, see, that's great. Now, I could have used that tip last week, no,
Now
week
you have
before
it.
last, when 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 I was traveling, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So, and I guess that would also support because sometimes we're traveling against, I mean, two different time zones and whatnot. That
Yes,
really also affected. That throws off everything. I mean, everything.
absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm. So, um, so you mentioned stress, and you said, maybe I'll get to that. Okay, so let's get to that.
Get to the stress. Ooh.
So, considering the various types of stress, because you've mentioned a couple, which ones do you find most effective for entrepreneurs, um, and why?
You mean getting rid of stress or
Yeah,
lowering? Mhm.
well, I guess getting rid of them, but managing it would probably be
Ah,
best.
yes, yes, yes. Okay. So first of all, I think it's really important to kind of look at our relationship with stress in
Mm,
itself. Because there's a lot of messaging, stress free that, stress
mhm,
free this, and we can get caught in this notion that we can actually get rid of stress. Um, that's it would be amazing. I don't think it's possible to get rid of stress. And stress can be your friend. Goodness, think of all the amazing accomplishments or the milestones that we have in our life, weddings, births, goals, jobs, lots of great things, but do bring on an added stress. Those are things that, stress can move us. It could help us be more productive, help us reach deadlines. But again, if we have a healthy nervous system, if it's self regulated, stress, it comes and goes, it comes and goes. But when it's prolonged, when it's impacting your thinking, that's when we really need to examine and look at how do we define stress? And there's a really wonderful video on YouTube. I can't think of her name right now. It's somebody out of Harvard, but she talks about the relationship of stress and happiness. And when we finally embrace that we can actually have a wonderful life with stress, we are more open to happiness. Um, so the idea is to really look at our stress, but then look at what it is that we need. Are you know are we over in our head? Like for entrepreneurs, when we're productive, we're actually in a beta state. That's one of our brain waves. And we need that for creativity. But what happens? Um, and I'm guilty of this. I tend to overthink, get in my head too much. What happens is our beta gets too high and we get that static feeling, and then we get stuck, and then we can't think and we push harder. But the idea is to really introduce brain calming things that we can do in the day to get that back down to a healthy beta. And brain calming things are simple, they're not earth shattering tips. One of them is breath work or mindfulness meditation. And one of my favorite things to do, love working with Dr. Amen and his team, but I love our meetings because we start off with meditation every time. Sometimes it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes. We even did a 12-minute, but it was just a wonderful way to go into the day. But it kind of, when you're in the little picture and it just seems so overwhelming, it just opens up and you're
mhm,
able to breathe and go into your day with more creativity. So breath work has so many health benefits. And then social connections, that's another tip. It is so easy to feel isolated as an entrepreneur. I felt that way for many years. And as an introvert, I love people, yet I also love my alone time. There's
mhm,
kind of like this battle going on. And so it was actually before the pandemic that I really noticed that I felt isolated. I was doing my thing, but I'm like, you know what? This is lonely. I need people in my life. And so I really stretched myself and started to connect with people in the
mhm,
community. And I feel like I found my people. And so that is such a health benefit too, and something that we need to intentionally remind ourselves to connect. And that is something that we can simply do texting a person, reaching out. or helping someone. And connection is one of those things you give, but you also feel the
Absolutely.
effects of it too, don't
Absolutely.
you? Yes.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Wow. So I really like the whole breath work. I've been reading a book um, called Miracle Morning.
Mm,
And that's one of the things that he talks about, is the meditation. And in some of the exercises, it's about the people call it breath work now. I just call it breathing. I call it
breathing.
um, and it's something as simple as, that whole box breathing
Yes.
example. Um, I was taught that to help manage not just my stress, but my blood pressure, through my acupuncturist. It's like, Anna, when you starting to feel all of that, headaches, I used to get headaches, my blood, and it was just do the box breathing, and that was like so simple that I could just sit there wherever I was. It's not something that's really noticeable because you don't have to say you but just sitting there, you can be sitting there and doing that breath work without it really being very noticeable. And so I love that you mentioned that, because
Yeah,
we're busy.
yes, and there are some newer studies coming out to show that over time, certain breath works can reduce inflammation, which I think is exciting. One of the things that, as someone, even as a coach, we have all these tips, um, and I use a lot of them, but some of them, like even breath work, I would talk about it, but I wouldn't do it consistently until I saw the opposite, the effects of not breathing correctly. It's scary stuff of what it leads to.
Wow.
It breathing too shallow, it's constricting and it's cutting off blood flow. And over time, it could lead to all kinds of health issues. So that scared me. So I started breathing more. So sometimes we have to, I like to know the whys. Why
Mhm.
is this important? That's just kind of how my brain works.
Well, and the thing is, I think that's part of being, a teacher trainer, is that sometimes we don't know what we don't know.
We don't
And
know.
so when we have someone, like professionally or in our lives, that can, tell us why up front, like I always breathe. You know what I mean? I learned how to breathe a little bit a long time ago. And then I
It's a
used to
good
sing a
thing.
little,
Uh,
and so singing, learning how to sing was really important, that you know how to breathe from your diaphragm. But to take that information and then put it in the context of health and well-being, that was totally out of my awareness.
mm,
You understand what I'm saying? And so I'm so glad that you are helping us, either reconnect with some simple things that can help us with our resilience with managing stress, because we may not have thought about it in that context.
yes. So, good news for singing, Anna. Did you know that singing or humming activates something called the vagus nerve, which can be it can be nervous system calming. So, singing and humming is can be very, very, internally calming and healing. I have something called an emotional rescue playlist, and it has songs that are very calming for me. So at
Mhm.
different times, if I'm having high, stress, or if I'm sad or just not in the mood, I'll have certain music and I'll sing or hum to it. So yes, it's simple, simple things that we can go back to that we really have known all along. We've just forgotten to use them.
Mhm, mhm. Or again, or not use them in
Mhm.
a different way. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It's like all of a sudden I have a brand new tool here. I've always had this hammer. I've always had the hammer, but it's like, I've only used the hammer to hammer a nail. Maybe I could use it for something else, like cracking walnuts. You know what I'm
I like the way you think. Oh,
saying? But I just appreciate that.
yeah.
Before we wrap up though, I know that you are also not only in the brain health area, but you're also in the leadership space as a coach. So leadership also involves resilience and perseverance, or I should say
Oh, yeah.
resilient perseverance.
Ooh, yes.
And
Like
so
that.
how can entrepreneurs cultivate those kinds of qualities without compromising their mental or brain health?
Wow. So I think it's important to understand the role that their brain plays into mental health. Again, they go hand in hand, and good mental health is really a reflection of good brain function. So really think about, just, we're aware of our skin, our hair, but we don't see our brain, but it's really running our day. It's like our business assistant, and it's a really good assistant, or it really, wreaks havoc on our day. So really understanding the functioning of it. We can also understand that mental hygiene, and I heard this quote early on, I think it's someone from the CDC mentioned a few years back. Mental hygiene is just as important as washing your hands. So making, you know, your mental focus and your brain health a part of your everyday life. And it really does require a different way of looking at it, reframing your thoughts. So think about the negative thoughts that we might have, and we call them the ants, the automatic negative thoughts. And so question those thoughts, because every time we have a sad thought, angry thought, hateful thought, it immediately causes our temperature to be a little bit colder in our body, and it constricts our blood vessels. And then it impacts our blood flow to our brain. And that's why when we're in a rage or anger, we can't think clearly, or if we're in a state of fear, it's because our blood flow has been lowered. And every time we have a happy or, glad thought, the opposite's true. Our hands get warmer. We open up. So look at the thought that you might be attached to that's causing you
Mm.
harm, that you're focusing on day in and day out, and just simply question it and ask yourself. There's 4 questions that Byron Katie from the book Loving What's True, she talks about, question your thoughts. And the first question is this thought true that I'm having? And then the next question is it absolutely true 100% of the time?
Mm.
And then the third is simply, how do I feel when I think that thought? Is it, if am I sad? And just it's a realization that you're having, how your thoughts are impacting
Mm.
you. And then how do you feel without the thought? Well, I feel glad. I feel more hopeful. And then what's a turnaround statement that you can replace that negative thought? So it really is starting to build your awareness of your daily thoughts.
Love this. I love this. And you just, I'm going to have to pull that book out, pull that book off the shelf again. Just repeat those four questions again, Barbara.
Is it true? Is it absolutely true? Like 100% of the time?
Mm.
And how do I feel when I think that thought? How do I feel when I don't think that thought?
Mm.
And what's a turnaround statement? I practice this a lot, and I do some work in our regional jail with some inmates who signed up for some brain health classes, and we go through these exercises. And even this morning, they were going through them, and we lock onto their thoughts. And they love this. They don't have to talk about mental health. In fact, we don't even use that word. We talk
Mhm.
about brain struggles. It's a much easier way to, you know, bring a different conversation. And they love talking about the ants. There's the blaming ant, the fortune telling ant, the mind reading ant. So we really put some otherwise heavy topics into some fun and understandable and easy languaging.
And as you were saying that about brain health, um, when you approach it from that perspective, there's not the stigma attached to the mental health issues, because I'm glad that people are starting to at least look at the words or the phrase mental wellness. At least that
Yes.
gives a little bit um, different context, for people to be able to accept. But the but talking about brain health, which again, as you said, absolutely impacts our mental health and our mental wellness, is a much easier conversation to have. So,
Yes, and the thing is, brain health, it is the most complex organ in the universe, but it loves simplicity, and you don't need to know everything about the brain to, you just know basics like, I have my iPhone over here. We know the basics just enough to get to what we need to faster. And
mhm.
so we focus on key systems. What is your brain type? And there's a free, easy assessment that people can look up, go through. It's called brainhealthassessment.com. There's 5 main types, there's 16 different combinations, but it shows them it's not a diagnosis, but it's kind of a roadmap to show where there might be some vulnerabilities happening. It'll show your strengths and also show you how it could be impacting your sleep or your executive functioning or even your inner peace.
Oh, I love that. Give. I'm going to put that in the notes for today, and that's called it's called brain health. What?
Brainhealthassessment.com.
Okay, brain health. Okay, I don't know what's going on with my computer. Brain health. Okay. So, Barbara, this has been amazing.
Oh, this has been fun. I could talk this everybody geeks out on something. This is what I geek out on.
And look, and I appreciate that. I really, really do. So, Barbara, we're really almost at the end of our time together. How can people get in touch with you so that if they need some more support, if they need to have questions, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so they can reach out to me on my website, discovernextstep.com. There's a contact button there, or LinkedIn. Just type in my name and I'll pop out there too.
Oh, see, that's great. And could you just give us a brief list of the services that you provide? I know that you're a coach, you're an executive
Mhm.
coach, but what are some of the things that if they reached out to you,
Mhm.
what would they be?
Yeah, so these days I work with a lot of health and wellness professionals who are managing their stress, also managing their energy, and they want to stay effective in their roles, but they don't want to sacrifice their own health and wellness. So I really love to work with those who are boots on the ground, helping other people, and but they just have this really big calling, but they also need to focus on their own care. And someone was sharing something with me the other day that just struck me. And so I'm going to pass it on to you. Show up 100% for yourself first so you can help others. And that's to you, but that's also to me too, just because I feel like I need to model being real with people. So I'm just as susceptible. We are all susceptible. And we can link arms together and help each other down this road.
Well, again, I've learned so much, and my awareness has been up leveled. And I get a chance to just really review some of the things that, as an entrepreneur, as a coach, as a member of a family, that I too have to deal with,
Mhm.
and how I can best support myself. So thank you again, Barbara Gustafson.
Thank you, Anna. This was fun.
Yes, thank you so much. And so, my friends, as we wrap up another exciting and insightful episode of the Urban Entrepreneur Show, I just want to thank my guest, Barbara Gus Gustavson.
You got it.
um, and also extend a heartfelt thanks to you, our listening audience, who've been with us week after week, taking notes and implementing some of the things that our esteemed guests on the show have shared. Because look, the truth of the matter is our passion for urban entrepreneurs is really the thing that drives us. And so we're just thrilled to be able to bring week after week great people like Barbara to you. So today's show was also brought to you by Thrive Leadership Institute, your go-to source for coaching, training, and resources that can supercharge your personal and professional growth. Now, you can get in touch with us by going to thriveleadershipinstitute.com. But if you are an entrepreneur and you have an amazing story to share, consider joining us as a guest, just like Barbara did. We're all about sharing wisdom and experiences that inspire. So don't hesitate to give us a call or reach out to us. And you can find out more about that by going to theurbanentrepreneurshow.com. Right there, you can sign up and find more information about us. And so, thank you again, Barbara. I just appreciate you so much spending this time with us.
Thank you so much. It was such a joy.
All right, then. So, bye bye for now, everyone, and we'll see you the next time.